Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we're looking at some new cards which are coming out of brand new booster pack, and these are to support the Heroic Challenger monsters, which are an archetype used by Nistro. Heroic Challenger Knuckle Knife is a level 1 Earth Attribute Warrior type effect monster with 600 attack and 200 defense. You can only use the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. If you control a heroic monster, except a level 1 monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. 2. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one warrior monster you control, the level of that monster, or this card becomes the level of the other, but you cannot declare attacks for the rest of this turn except Xyz monsters. The whole purpose of this card is it's able to just special summon itself immediately, and that's what a lot of the heroic monsters want to be doing. They want to swarm the field, much like a lot of the other warrior type monsters. The secondary effect is actually where its ability comes into play, in that you're able to either adjust your monsters so that they're both level 1, so that you can actually go into number 54. Lionheart was actually used by Nistro. He was being controlled at the time, but he still used it nonetheless, and so that's very much associated with him. There are probably another couple of examples that I can't remember that also pair alongside with it being level 1. There is definitely a Heroic Challenger that's a level 1 as well, that's already exists. It's very old, but it's very useful if you can actually have it stay out for a turn, because I think it can basically sacrifice itself to bring out a couple of other Heroic Challenger monsters. Not an effect you want to miss out on, because it does give you a +1. Or you can adjust it to become a level 4 to help you go into Excalibur or one of the other rank 4 Xyz monsters, because I think, as far as I'm aware, they just focus on rank 1 and rank 4. There's no alternative versions beyond that. You also have Gandiva, and I think there's at least one other Xyz monster. If you know it, put that down in the comments down below. The next card is Heroic Challenger Morning Star. This is a level 4 Earth Attribute Warrior type effect monster with 1500 attack and 1300 defense. You can only use the first, second, and third effects of this card's name once per turn. 1. If you control 2 or more warrior monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. 2. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one heroic spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. And 3. If this card is in your graveyard and you have 500 life points or less, you can special summon this card, but its effects are negated. So the first effect is just summoning to help swarm the monsters out onto the field. And because they just have to be warrior type monsters, you can be running quite a variety of those. You can even run elemental heroes alongside this if you wanted to. It's a decent enough effect, and it helps you get into your rank 4s, which I think a couple of them do require 3 level 4 monsters, so that's perfect for that. Secondary ability, just search for one of your heroic spell or trap cards, which is also quite decent. It's all about adding to the consistency of the deck. Final effect is if you've got 500 life points or less, you're able to just special summon this card, so it can then be used as part of an additional Xyz summon, especially since its effects are negated. I wouldn't worry too much about the 500 life points or less effect for the condition of it, just because I have read these cards ahead of time, and I know there is a monster card that's able to wipe your life points to 500 points, so that you don't have to kind of play this game of chicken where you're trying to force your opponent to reduce your life points. Heroic Champion Clown Solace is a rank 4 light attribute warrior type Xyz effect monster, 2500 attack and 2000 defense. The materials, it requires 2 level 4 warrior type monsters. You can only use the second and third effects of this card's name each once per turn. 1. Monsters your opponent controls cannot target other monsters for attacks. 2. You can pay life points so that you only have 500 left. At the start of the battle phase this turn, the attack of one face-up monster you control becomes doubled. And 3. When an attack is declared involving an opponent's monster, you can detach one material from this card, then target one face-up monster your opponent controls. This card gains attack equal to that monster's until the end of this turn. The whole point of some of the beat stick heroic monsters, including Excalibur and this card, is to basically OTK your opponent. If you can actually double your monster's attack points and get them to a significant amount, you can actually wipe out your opponent's life points before they know what's hit them. The summoning requirement on this doesn't actually require a heroic challenger monster, so it's generic enough to just be run in any level 4 warrior type monster deck. And so long as you've got level 4 warriors, you're fine. You can make this card. First effect, prevents all your other monsters from being targeted for attacks. That's perfect. That means your weaker ones are the ones you need to stall out until you get certain conditions for. That's perfect for having this card out. There is no other better way to kind of contain your opponent's attacks. It's very similar to like the Patrician of Darkness for zombie type monsters, only this is specifically directing its attacks to itself. Secondary ability, paying life points to make it only having 500 left is a massive gamble. But remember what I said about Morningstar. There are monsters with the effect to reduce your life points to 500, which is one of the conditions here. To then have one of your monsters' attack points doubled, I'd understand why you'd probably want to use this effect for this monster, because actually that would make it a 5,000 attack monster. And if you boost it up with the third effect to absorb your opponent's monster's attack points, you're guaranteeing about 5,000 life points of damage. If you've got Excalibur on the field as well, you're going to OTK your opponent very quickly. It says as part of the note that Clam Solace is a legendary sword of light that appears throughout Celtic and Irish folklore. Myth and legend and might be the basis for the legend of Excalibur, which is very heavily the heroic challenges are based on, like Roman gladiators, so that's kind of where the themes are connected. Heroic Champion Yugioh is a rank 1 light attribute warrior type Xyz effect monster with 700 attack and 1800 defense. It requires as materials 2 level 1 warrior type monsters. You can only use the second and third effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. The first time each warrior type monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect each turn, it is not destroyed. 2. You can detach 2 materials from this card, then target 1 level or rank 4 warrior type monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and if you do, this card gains attack equal to that monster's original attack. And 3. When an attack is declared involving an opponent's monster, you can gain life points equal to half its attack. The brilliant part of this card is, even though it is only a rank 1, it's very powerful for what it needs to be. The first effect, it's every warrior monster you have on your field the first time every single turn. So that means if your opponent tries to attack multiple times into different monsters, throughout this effect, you're actually being able to protect each of those monsters, and this reoccurs each and every turn. That is a brilliant effect. Unless your opponent reads this effect, they're not going to understand that this is what you're doing. Secondary ability, I think, is also very useful, because this is where you are relying on your materials to detach. By detaching the 2 of them, by summoning back your required monster, not only are you bringing those monsters back, they might be beat sticks, they might just be vanilla monsters, it might be Xyz monsters with no materials, which essentially makes them vanilla monsters, but those attack points get pumped into this card, making it for rank 4. If you're looking at Excalibur, that make this a 2,700 attack monster. Looking at some of the other examples, 2,500, that would make this a 3,200 attack monster. And the third effect is also very useful for how the deck needs to operate, considering that they're reliant on they're losing a lot of life points. Nistro was very much about no pain, no gain. So the more you were suffering, the better the type of duel you can have, the more thrill of the hunt he could have, and very much everything was getting him down to as much of a burden and a disadvantage as possible before sweeping the opponent. This actually does the reverse. Every time an attack is declared involving an opponent's monster, that means it can be against your opponent's monster as well. You're gaining life points. Who's going to complain about that? It's a good way of consistently within its own archetype replenishing life points. And I don't understand why they haven't introduced this type of theming in maybe a bit sooner. And the final card is Heroic Envoy. This is a normal spell card with the effect. You can only use the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. Add 1 heroic monster from your deck to your hand. And 2, if you have 500 life points or less, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 heroic card in your graveyard, add it to your hand. This just acts like a rotor for the deck. I don't understand why you would need one for the heroic challenges, since rotor is itself for warrior type monsters, so it works perfectly fine. The secondary effect, remember, you can get your life points consistently to 500 or less. By just banishing this card, you're able to just recover one of your heroic cards in your graveyard. It doesn't have to be specifically a spell, a trap, or a monster. It could be any of the 3, and it can actually do the same for your extra deck monsters. So if you've run out of, say, your Excalibur, you can send that back to the extra deck and hopefully turn into one of those Excaliburs again without having to run things such as Pot of Avarice even though I would argue you still want to be running Pot of Avarice for this style of deck, does go through its resources and its monsters very fast. So I'd love to know, guys, what do you think of these cards? I am personally excited. I love Nistro. I didn't think he got as much credit as he could have. The only thing I'd say is I know this is his main deck and there have been other characters that kind of swap out their decks. I would love for him to get some Bouncer cards, because I think they only have like 5 or 6 cards. They've got Bouncer Guard, which is a trap card. They've got the Phantom Bouncer. They've got an Xyz monster, and they've got Blade Bouncer. So relatively speaking, they've got about 4 cards. I can't think of any others. If you can, put those in the description, in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this, I'd appreciate you subscribing and watching one of my other videos here. It will probably be one of the days of Karibo, just so you guys are aware. And I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and a Happy New Year.